Every species in the Orion trade hub had a word for the human vessel that dropped out of faster-than-light travel that afternoon. The Velani called it waste metal. The Ithrani called it floating shame. The Greci simply called it ugly. The ship was named Perseverance, and it looked like someone had welded together 100 cargo containers, added engines as an afterthought, and forgotten to smooth out the edges. It was blocky where other ships were sleek. It was gray where other ships were polished chrome or elegant crystal. Strange bumps and protrusions covered its hull like warts on old skin. Ambassador Delaney of the Velani Consortium stood on the observation deck and watched the human ship crawl toward the docking ring. His long blue fingers tapped against the glass in amusement. Behind him, a group of wealthy merchants had gathered to enjoy the show. "Look at its speed rating," one of them said, pointing at the data screen. "It moves at 1/3 standard velocity. My personal yacht could outrun it backward." Laughter filled the observation deck. Delaney had been studying humans since they joined the galactic community 12 years ago. They were interesting creatures, tough, adaptable, and surprisingly clever for a species that had only recently discovered faster-than-light travel. But their ships were a joke. Every other spacefaring species had spent thousands of years perfecting elegant, fast, efficient vessels. Humans built flying bricks. The station's traffic controller was a four-armed Greci named Pollux. His voice crackled over the public channel as he assigned the Perseverance to docking lane 7, the slowest lane, reserved for broken-down freighters and ships too damaged to maneuver properly. "Human vessel Perseverance," Pollux announced, not bothering to hide his contempt. "Proceed to lane 7 at your current speed. Please try not to block traffic." More laughter from the observation deck. The human captain's response came through calm and professional. "Acknowledged, Orion Control, proceeding to lane 7. No anger, no embarrassment, just acknowledgement." An Ithrani merchant named Sorrel leaned toward the communication panel and opened a broadcast on the public shipping frequency. His crystalline body shimmered with amusement. "Attention all vessels. If anyone has lost a museum artifact from the pre-technology era, we have located it. It appears to be attempting to dock." The channel erupted with alien laughter. Ships from a dozen different species joined in the mockery. Someone suggested the humans had built their ship from leftover parts. Someone else asked if the crew had to get out and push. Through it all, the Perseverance said nothing. It simply continued its slow, steady approach to the docking ring. Inside the observation deck, Delaney noticed something that the laughing merchants missed. The human ship's hull was covered in those strange protrusions, dozens of them, arranged in patterns that seemed almost deliberate. Most observers assumed they were primitive sensor arrays or perhaps cooling systems for inefficient engines. Delaney was not so sure. He had read reports about humans, about their homeworld, Earth, which the galactic databases classified as a Category 7 deathworld, a planet of extreme temperatures, violent weather, predatory animals, and constant natural disasters. The humans had not just survived there, they had thrived. They had built civilizations while fighting off creatures that would terrify most galactic species. Such a species did not build ugly ships by accident. The Perseverance completed its docking procedure without incident. Its crew began unloading cargo, rare minerals from Earth that fetched high prices on the galactic market. The human captain, a woman named Diane Reyes, handled the paperwork herself. She was short by human standards, with dark hair streaked with gray and eyes that had seen too many things to be surprised by alien mockery. A Velani customs official looked at her filed flight plan and burst out laughing. "You're taking the disputed corridor back to human space? Alone? In that ship?" Captain Reyes nodded. "Shortest route home." "The disputed corridor is Korathi hunting ground," the official said. "They have raiders everywhere, fast ships, pulse disruptors that can kill your engines from half a sector away, and you want to fly through there in a ship that moves like frozen mud." "We'll manage." The official shook his head and stamped her documents. "Your funeral, human, don't say we didn't warn you." Word spread quickly through the station. The humans were going to fly their slow, ugly ship through the most dangerous stretch of space in the sector. Betting pools formed within hours. Most aliens wagered the Perseverance would be captured or destroyed within 2 days. A few optimistic souls gave it a week. No one bet on the humans actually making it through. Ambassador Delaney watched from his private quarters as the Perseverance undocked and began its slow journey toward the disputed corridor. That strange feeling nagged at him again, the sense that he was missing something important. The ship was so slow, so primitive, so utterly wrong by every standard of galactic engineering. And yet the humans had sent it anyway. Delaney pulled up everything he could find about human military history. He read about something called siege warfare, about battles where humans had held positions for months or years against superior forces, about a doctrine that valued endurance over speed, stubbornness over elegance. A cold feeling settled in his stomach. What if the humans had not built a slow ship because they could not build a fast one? What if they had built exactly what they wanted to build? But by then, the Perseverance had already disappeared into the darkness of the disputed corridor. And the Korathi were waiting. 6 shapes moved through the darkness between stars like wolves stalking wounded prey. The Korathi destroyers were everything the human ship was not. They were fast, sharp, and built for one purpose: killing. Their hulls curved like predator claws. Their engines burned hot enough to push them to twice standard galactic speed. Their weapons could cripple a merchant vessel before its crew even knew they were under attack. War Leader Thren sat in his command chair and watched the sensor display with all 4 of his yellow eyes. His gray skin was marked with ritual scars from 100 successful raids. His crew feared him. His enemies feared him more. The disputed corridor was his territory. 3 major powers claimed the space on paper, but none of them patrolled it. That made it perfect hunting ground for the Korathi Dominion. Every month, Thren and his pack took dozens of ships. They stole cargo, captured crews for the slave markets, and stripped vessels down to scrap metal. It was good work, profitable work. And today, the universe had delivered him the easiest target he had ever seen. War Leader, his sensor officer reported, the human vessel is maintaining course through Sector 7. Speed unchanged. No escort detected. Thren's lips pulled back to reveal rows of sharp teeth. Confirm the target. Confirmed, Terran cargo freighter Perseverance class, single ship. Minimal weapons signatures, hull composition. Suggests primitive alloy construction. Speed, 1/3 standard velocity. Laughter rippled through the bridge. Thren allowed it. His crew had earned the right to enjoy this moment. The Korathi had studied humans carefully since the newcomers arrived in galactic space. They knew about Earth, the deathworld that had produced these strange, soft-looking creatures. They knew humans were tougher than they appeared, that their biology could handle damage that would kill most species. But they also knew human technology was primitive. Their ships were slow. Their weapons were weak. Their shields were thin. A single Korathi destroyer could handle 3 human vessels, 6 destroyers against 1 freighter. This would not even qualify as a fight. They must be stupid, his weapons officer growled. Flying through our territory alone at that speed, do they want to die? Perhaps they do not know about us, another officer suggested. Thren shook his head. They know, every species knows to avoid the corridor. The humans either think they can sneak through or they think they can fight. His 4 eyes narrowed with amusement. Let us show them how wrong they are. He opened the fleet channel. All ships intercept pattern Delta, surround the target and disable its engines. I want the cargo intact and the crew alive. Human slaves fetch high prices on the outer markets. 6 destroyers changed course in perfect formation. Their engines flared bright against the black void as they accelerated toward the slow-moving human ship. Thren had done this hundreds of times. The pattern was always the same. Surround the target, demand surrender. If the target refused, hit it with pulse disruptors to kill the engines. Board the crippled vessel, take everything of value, simple, efficient, profitable. His tactical officer frowned at her display. War leader, I am detecting unusual readings from the human ship. Explain. The hull protrusions, they appear to be something, not sensors, not cooling systems. I cannot identify their purpose. Thren waved a clawed hand dismissively. Human technology is primitive. They probably added those structures because they thought they looked impressive. Focus on the approach. But something nagged at the back of his mind, a small voice that whispered caution. He ignored it. 30 minutes later, the 6 Korathi destroyers surrounded the Perseverance in a perfect sphere. The human ship, hung in the center like a trapped animal, unable to escape in any direction. Its ugly gray hull reflected the light from distant stars. Thren opened a communication channel. His translators converted his words into the human language called English. Terran vessel Perseverance, this is war leader Thren of the Korathi Dominion. You are surrounded. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in your destruction. You have 60 seconds to comply. He leaned back in his chair and waited. Most captains surrendered immediately. Some tried to bargain. A few tried to run. None of them ever succeeded. The human response came after 10 seconds. Korathi vessel, this is Captain Diane Reyes of the Perseverance. Your demand is refused. We will not surrender. We will not power down. I recommend you withdraw from this engagement while you still can. Silence filled the Korathi bridge. Then Thren laughed. It started as a low chuckle and built into a roar that shook his chest. His crew joined in, howling with amusement at the absurdity of the human's words. She recommends we withdraw, Thren repeated, wiping tears from his lower eyes. One slow freighter against 6 destroyers, and she recommends we withdraw. He composed himself and opened the channel again. Captain Reyes, I admire your courage, but courage will not save you. This is your final warning. Surrender now or we will disable your ship by force. The human's voice came back steady and calm. War leader Thren, I'm going to give you the same answer I've given to every pirate, raider, and warlord who has ever threatened my ship. No. Thren's amusement faded. He was not accustomed to prey that talked back. So be it, he growled. All ships open fire, disable their engines, try not to damage the cargo. 6 Korathi destroyers unleashed their weapons at once. And the universe began to teach war leader Thren a lesson about humans. 18 months before the Perseverance entered the disputed corridor, a meeting took place in a bunker deep beneath the mountains of Switzerland. Admiral Patricia Okonkwo stood before the assembled leaders of the United Nations Space Command. She was tall, gray-haired, and carried herself with the weight of 30 years in uniform. Behind her, a holographic display showed the ships of a dozen alien species, all of them faster, sleeker, and more advanced than anything humanity had ever built. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, we have a problem, and the problem is this: we cannot win. The room went silent. Since humanity joined the galactic community 12 years ago, we have tried to compete with other species on their terms. We have poured resources into building faster ships, stronger shields, more powerful energy weapons, and we have failed. Our fastest vessel is still slower than the slowest alien freighter. Our best weapons barely scratch their weakest shields. She changed the display to show a comparison chart. Human ships sat at the bottom of every category. The Velani have had spaceflight for 9,000 years, the Ithrani for 6,000. Even the Korathi, who we consider primitive raiders, have been building warships for 3 millennia. We have been in space for less than 2 centuries. We cannot catch up. We cannot match them, and if we try to fight them on their terms, we will lose. A general in the front row raised his hand. What do you suggest, Admiral, that we surrender? No, Okonkwo's eyes hardened. I suggest we stop fighting on their terms and start fighting on ours. She pulled up a new display. This one showed images from human history, ancient fortresses, trenches stretching across muddy battlefields, soldiers holding positions against impossible odds. Throughout our history, humans have faced enemies who were faster, stronger, and more numerous. And throughout our history, we have found ways to win, not through speed, not through superior technology, through something else entirely. She pointed at an image of a ruined city. Stalingrad, the German army was better equipped, better trained, and better supplied. The Soviets held the city for 5 months of brutal fighting. They lost over 1 million soldiers, but they won. Another image, a narrow mountain pass. Thermopylae, 300 Spartans against the largest army the ancient world had ever seen. They held for 3 days and took 20,000 enemies with them. Another image, endless lines of trenches. The Western Front, 4 years of grinding warfare where neither side could advance more than a few miles. The armies that survived were the ones that could endure. She turned back to face the room. Humans do not win fights by being faster or stronger. We win by being stubborn. We win by refusing to die. We win by making the enemy pay such a terrible price for every inch of ground that they eventually decide. Victory is not worth the cost. The holographic display changed again. This time it showed a ship design unlike anything the room had seen before. It was blocky, ugly, covered in strange protrusions. It looked nothing like the elegant vessels of the galactic community. This is the Perseverance-class heavy frigate. It is not fast. It cannot outrun anything in the galaxy. Its shields are minimal because shields require too much power to maintain under sustained fire. She smiled grimly. But it does not need to run, and it does not need shields, because this ship is built to do one thing, take damage and keep fighting. The display zoomed in on the hull design. Regenerative hull plating, billions of nanomachines embedded in the armor, capable of repairing damage even during combat. The more you hurt this ship, the harder it works to heal itself. Another zoom showed the weapon systems. Magnetic accelerator cannons, no plasma, no energy beams, no guided missiles, just tungsten slugs moving at a fraction of light speed. Kinetic impactors cannot be stopped by shields. They do not run out of ammunition, and they hit harder than anything the galaxy has ever seen. The general who had spoken earlier leaned forward. You're describing a ship designed to stand its ground and slug it out. That's suicide. No, General, that's siege warfare. Okonkwo pointed at the ship design. Every system is redundant. Every component can be replaced. The crew quarters are armored bunkers. The damage control stations are everywhere. This ship is designed to fight for hours, days, or weeks if necessary. It is designed to take everything the enemy can throw at it and keep coming. She pulled up one final image. It showed the Perseverance-class frigate surrounded by destroyed enemy vessels. We ran simulations against every known hostile species in the galaxy. The Korathi Raiders, the Vrethian Warclans, even the Dominion Heavies. In every simulation, the same pattern emerged. The enemy attacks. They do damage. They think they are winning. And then they discover that the human ship is still fighting, still shooting, still refusing to die. Her voice hardened. By the time they realize their mistake, they have already lost too many ships to retreat safely, and that is when the human ship finishes them. The room was silent for a long moment. Finally, the general spoke again. You want us to build ships that look weak, ships that invite attack. Yes. Ships designed to be underestimated. Exactly. And when the enemy realizes their mistake. Admiral Okonkwo smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. By then, General, it will be far too late. Plasma fire turned the void into a storm of burning light. 6 Korathi destroyers unleashed everything they had. Pulse disruptors screamed through space, designed to overload engine systems. Plasma cannons hurled balls of superheated gas that could melt through standard hull plating. Missile barrages detonated against the human ship's surface in chains of bright explosions. The Perseverance shuddered under the assault. Sections of its ugly gray hull crumpled inward. Atmosphere vented from a dozen breaches, forming clouds of frozen crystals that sparkled in the weapon's fire. Warning lights flickered. Systems overloaded. The ship's running lights went dark. On the bridge of the lead destroyer, War Leader Thren bared his teeth in satisfaction. Report. Multiple hull breaches detected, his sensor officer announced. Power readings dropping, life support signatures failing across multiple decks. The human vessel is crippled. Thren nodded. Another easy victory. The humans had shown courage by refusing to surrender, but courage meant nothing against superior firepower. In minutes, his boarding teams would cut their way inside and claim the ship. The human crew would be dragged out in chains. He was already calculating how much he would get for them at the slave markets. Then his sensor officer made a sound that Thren had never heard before, something between a gasp and a whimper. War Leader, the human ship. What about it? The hull breaches, they are closing. Thren's 4 eyes snapped to the tactical display. The Perseverance still hung in the center of his formation, dark and silent. But the sensor data showed something impossible. The wounds in the human ship's hull were shrinking. Metal was flowing like liquid, filling gaps, sealing tears, rebuilding destroyed sections. The ship was healing itself. Impossible, Thren whispered. Ships do not heal. As if answering him, the Perseverance's running lights flickered back on. Then its secondary lights. Then every light on the vessel blazed to life at once, brighter than before. And the strange protrusions on its hull, those bumps and bulges that everyone had assumed were primitive sensors, began to move. They rotated outward on mechanical. Arms, they extended from the hull like claws unfolding. They locked into position and pointed at the 6 Korathi destroyers surrounding the human vessel. Those were not sensors. Those were weapons. Inside the Perseverance, Captain Diane Reyes gripped her command chair as damage reports flooded in from every section of the ship. 30% hull damage, 12 compartments vented to space, 27 crew members injured, 3 critically, fire suppression systems running at maximum capacity. But the engines were online, the weapons were charged, and her crew was still fighting. Status on the main guns, she said. Her weapons officer, a young man named David Park, checked his console. Capacitor banks at full charge, all 16 accelerator cannons showing green, targeting solutions locked on all 6 hostiles. Damage control. Chief Engineer Rosa Mendez's voice crackled through the intercom from somewhere deep in the ship's bowels. Nanomachines working overtime, Captain. We're patching holes faster than they can make them. Give me 20 minutes and I'll have us back to 70% integrity. Reyes allowed herself a small smile. The Korathi had done exactly what every enemy did when they faced a Perseverance-class ship. They had attacked hard and fast, expecting a quick victory. They had spent their opening salvo. They had revealed their positions. And now they were about to learn why humans built slow ships. All hands, she announced over the shipwide channel. This is the captain. We took their best shot. We're still here. Now it's our turn. She leaned forward in her chair. Mr. Park, weapons free, make it count. I captain firing. The Perseverance had no elegant weapons. No plasma cannons, no energy beams, no guided missiles. Instead, it had 16 magnetic accelerator cannons mounted across its hull. Each cannon was essentially a long tube lined with electromagnetic coils. Each cannon held a magazine of tungsten slugs, simple metal rods, each one the size of a human arm. When the coils activated, they accelerated those tungsten rods to 4% of light speed. The first cannon fired. There was no flash, no beam, no visible projectile. Just a slight vibration through the ship's frame as magnetic forces hurled a slug across the void. The slug crossed the distance to the nearest Korathi destroyer in less than a heartbeat. It struck the enemy ship's forward section and did not stop. It punched through shields that were designed to deflect energy weapons. It tore through armor plating like paper. It exited the other side of the destroyer and continued into the darkness of space. The Korathi ship broke in half. Atmosphere and bodies spilled from the wound. Explosions rippled through what remained as power systems overloaded. In less than 3 seconds, a vessel that had served war leader Thren for 15 years was reduced to tumbling wreckage. On Thren's bridge, every officer stared at their displays in shock. Then the Perseverance fired again, and again, and again. 16 cannons, firing in sequence, hurling kinetic death across the battlefield. The second destroyer lost its engine section. The third took a slug through its reactor core and vanished in a ball of nuclear fire. The fourth tried to maneuver and took 2 hits that cored its stem to stern. In less than 30 seconds, 4 of Thren's 6 ships were dead. The remaining 2 destroyers broke formation and ran. They poured every bit of power into their engines, desperate to escape the nightmare that the slow human ship had become. But the Perseverance was not finished. Captain Reyes watched the tactical display with cold eyes. "Pursuit course, don't let them call for reinforcements." The ugly human ship turned to follow its fleeing prey. It was slow, it would never catch them in a straight race. But its guns could reach a very long way. And the fight was far from over. 3 hours into the battle, the Perseverance was burning. Fire suppression foam covered half the corridors. Emergency bulkheads had sealed off 6 compartments that no longer held atmosphere. The medical bay was full of wounded crew members, some missing limbs, others burned, all of them refusing to stop working. And still the ship fought on. The 2 surviving Korathi destroyers had not escaped. They had tried. They had pushed their engines until the reactor warnings screamed. But every time they opened distance, the human ship's cannons reached out and reminded them that distance meant nothing to kinetic weapons traveling at a fraction of light speed. One destroyer had lost its primary engine. The other had taken a glancing hit that had torn away half its weapons array. Both ships had turned to fight because running was no longer an option. War leader Thren stood on a bridge filled with smoke and sparking consoles. 2 of his officers were dead. 3 more were injured. His flagship was dying around him, but he refused to abandon his command chair. "All weapons concentrate fire on the human ship," he ordered. "Every gun, every missile, everything we have left." The 2 destroyers unleashed another barrage. Plasma fire and missiles streaked across the void and hammered into the Perseverance. More hull breaches opened, more systems failed, more alarms screamed. On the human bridge, Captain Reyes watched her damage readouts climb into the red. 47% hull integrity, 60% of compartments compromised. 2 of her 16 main guns were offline, destroyed by direct hits. Her crew was exhausted, running on coffee and determination. "Captain," David Park reported from his weapons station, "we're running low on ammunition, down to 30% of our tungsten reserves." "Acknowledged." Reyes did not take her eyes off the tactical display. "Chief Mendez, status on the nanomachines." Rosa Mendez's voice came through crackling with static. Somewhere in the background, metal groaned and sparks flew. "They're working, Captain, but we're pushing them past design limits. If we take much more damage, they won't be able to keep up." "Understood. How long can you keep us fighting?" A pause, then, "As long as you need me to, ma'am." That was the human way, not promises of victory, not guarantees of success, just the stubborn refusal to give up until the job was done. Reyes turned to her communications officer. "Any signals from the Korathi ships?" "They've been broadcasting for reinforcements for the past 2 hours, Captain. No response. Either no one is close enough to help, or no one wants to get involved." Good, that meant this fight would end here, one way or another. Another barrage struck the Perseverance. The ship lurched hard to port, lights flickered. Somewhere below deck, something exploded. "Direct hit to Section 14, a damage control officer reported. "Hull breach, sealing now." Reyes gripped her chair and waited for the shaking to stop. When it did, she issued her next order. "Target the crippled destroyer, finish it." 3 cannons fired in sequence. The tungsten slugs crossed the void in less than a second. They struck the already damaged Korathi ship in its midsection and tore it apart. The destroyer broke into 3 pieces, each one spinning away into the darkness. One enemy left. War leader Thren watched his last ally die and felt something he had not felt in decades: fear. The human ship was still there, burning, bleeding, barely holding together, but still there, still shooting, still refusing to die. How could any vessel survive this much damage? How could any crew keep fighting after 3 hours of continuous battle? His weapons officer turned to him with blood running down her face. War leader, we have depleted our missile reserves. Plasma cannons are overheating. We cannot maintain this rate of fire. Thren stared at the tactical display. His destroyer was faster than the human ship. He could still run. He could abandon the disputed corridor, flee to Korathi space, rebuild his forces, and return for revenge. But even as he considered it, he knew the truth. If he ran now, word would spread. The mighty war leader Thren, who had terrorized the shipping lanes for 20 years, had been driven off by a single human freighter. His reputation would be destroyed. His pack would abandon him. He would be nothing. Better to die fighting than live as a coward. All power to weapons, he growled. Ram them if you have to. We end this now. His destroyer surged forward, burning the last of its fuel reserves. Plasma cannons blazed as the ship charged directly at the Perseverance. On the human bridge, David Park looked up from his console. Captain, the enemy is closing fast. Collision course. They're going to ram us. Reyes nodded slowly. She had seen this before, the desperate final charge of an enemy who had realized too late that they were outmatched. It was almost sad. Hold fire until he's in optimal range, she ordered. Then give him everything we have left. The Korathi destroyer closed the distance. 10,000 kilometers, 5,000, 2,000. Fire! 12 cannons spoke at once. 12 tungsten slugs ripped through space and converged on the charging enemy vessel. They struck in a pattern designed to cause maximum structural damage: 2 to the engines, 4 to the midsection, 6 to the forward hull. The Korathi destroyer did not explode. It simply came apart. The kinetic impacts shattered its frame, broke its spine, turned its structure into a cloud of tumbling debris that scattered across the void. War leader Thren had just enough time to realize he had lost before his bridge decompressed, and the cold of space took him. On the Perseverance, the battle alarms finally went silent. Captain Reyes let out a breath she had been holding for 3 hours. Around her, her bridge crew slumped in their chairs, exhaustion written on every face. Damage report, she said quietly. The numbers were grim: 41% hull integrity, 8 crew members dead, 32 wounded, ammunition nearly depleted, half the ship's systems running on backup power. But they were alive, and the enemy was not. Set course for the nearest friendly station, Reyes ordered. Best speed. The Perseverance turned its battered hull towards safety and began its slow, painful journey home. It would take 2 weeks to reach port. 2 weeks of constant repairs, constant vigilance, constant struggle to keep the wounded ship alive. But they would make it. Because that was what humans did. News traveled faster than any starship. By the time the Perseverance limped back to the Orion trade hub, half the galaxy had already heard some version of the story. A single human freighter had destroyed 6 Korathi destroyers in the disputed corridor. The details varied depending on who told the tale. Some versions claimed the human ship had secret alien technology. Others insisted the Korathi had been caught off guard by a lucky shot. A few wild rumors suggested the humans had somehow cheated. But when the Perseverance actually docked, trailing smoke and leaking coolant, covered in battle scars that no amount of repair nanomachines could fully hide, the rumors stopped. Ambassador Delaney of the Velani Consortium stood on the same observation deck where he had watched the human ship depart 3 weeks earlier. This time, no one was laughing. The merchants who had mocked the slow, ugly vessel now stared in silence at the evidence of what it had survived. The hull was a patchwork of original plating and regenerated metal. Scorch marks from plasma fire covered nearly every surface. Several of the weapon protrusions were missing entirely, torn away by enemy missiles. The ship looked like it had been through a war. Because it had. Delaney pulled up the battle footage that the Veleni patrol had recovered from the disputed corridor. He had watched it 14 times now, and each viewing revealed something new. The way the human ship had absorbed the initial barrage, the impossible sight of its hull repairing itself under fire, the devastating precision of its kinetic weapons, the 3-hour nightmare of endurance that had ground 6 Korathi destroyers into dust. They were never trying to be fast, he murmured to himself. They built exactly what they wanted to build. Captain Diane Reyes walked off her ship 2 hours later after making sure every wounded crew member was on their way to proper medical facilities. She was exhausted. She had not slept more than 4 hours at a stretch since the battle began. Her uniform was stained with smoke and hydraulic fluid. Her eyes were hollow. But she walked with her head high. The station promenade fell quiet as she passed. Alien merchants who had mocked her ship now stepped aside to let her through. Species that had dismissed humans as primitive newcomers watched her with something that looked like respect. Or fear, perhaps both. A young Ithrani merchant, the same one who had broadcast jokes about watching metal rust, blocked her path. His crystalline body flickered with nervous light. "Captain," he said, his voice hesitant. "Your ship. I watched the footage. I saw what it did." Reyes stopped and looked at him. She did not smile. "And it's so slow. Everyone knows human ships are the slowest in the galaxy. Why would you build something so slow? Why not build faster ships like everyone else?" For a long moment, Reyes did not answer. She thought about the crew members she had lost, about the 3 hours of hell her ship had endured, about the doctrine of endurance that humanity had carried from the trenches of Earth to the void between stars. "Because where we come from," she said finally, "the fight isn't about who's fastest, it's about who's still standing at the end." She walked past the stunned merchant and disappeared into the station's interior. Within days, the story had spread across the galactic arm. The Korathi Dominion held emergency meetings and quietly added human vessels to their "Do Not Engage" list. Trade guilds that had once laughed at human ships began submitting requests for Terran escorts through dangerous space. Insurance companies adjusted their risk calculations. On a dozen worlds, military analysts studied the battle footage and tried to understand what they were seeing. The human doctrine did not match anything in galactic military theory. Ships were supposed to be fast and maneuverable. Battles were supposed to be brief exchanges of overwhelming firepower. The idea of building a vessel designed to absorb punishment and outlast its enemies was considered primitive and inefficient. But the debris of 6 Korathi destroyers floating in the disputed corridor suggested otherwise. In the months that followed, human ships became a common sight in dangerous space. They still looked ugly. They still moved at 1/3 standard velocity. Alien captains still made jokes about them in private. But no one laughed in public anymore. And no one attacked them. Ambassador Delaney filed his report to the Veleni Consortium 3 months after the battle. In it, he recommended treating humanity as a serious military power despite their technological limitations. He included a phrase that would later become famous across the galactic diplomatic community. "Do not confuse slow with weak. Human ships are not designed to escape danger. They are designed to end it. Any species that mistakes their patience for vulnerability will learn the truth the same way the Korathi did, too late to matter." Far across the galaxy in the shipyards orbiting Earth, construction continued on the next generation of Perseverance-class vessels. Engineers reviewed the battle data and made small improvements. Thicker armor here, more redundant systems there, better nanomachine integration throughout. The ships would still be slow, still be ugly, still be mocked by every species that measured worth in speed and elegance. And they would still be exactly what humanity needed them to be. Not ships built to run away. Ships built to win. In her quarters on the repaired Perseverance, Captain Diane Reyes reviewed her new deployment orders. The Trade Coalition had hired her ship to escort a convoy through 3 sectors of contested space. The pay was excellent. The route was dangerous. She smiled and signed the acceptance form. There would always be pirates and raiders who thought a slow human ship was easy prey. There would always be enemies who mistook endurance for weakness. There would always be battles to fight. And the Perseverance would be there to fight them. Because that was what humans did. They endured, they survived, they refused to give up. And in the end, they stood victorious over the wreckage of those who had underestimated them. Always,